My name is Elliot Raines. After 10 loyal years, my boss blindsided me with a smile and the words, "Your role is being sunset." Just like that, erased, replaced by someone younger, cheaper, less experienced. I felt gutted, humiliated, invisible. But I didn't break. I rose. Quietly, deliberately, and took back more than they ever expected. Please listen to the whole story. Then tell me, did I do the right thing? Would you have walked away? Or stood your ground? I truly value your thoughts. It was a Friday in late October, one of those crisp, gray afternoons where the wind carries more than just the chill. Something about the air felt off. You'd think after 30 years in the workforce, 10 of them at the same company, I'd know when a storm was coming. But even then, I didn't see it until it hit me square in the face. The day had been quiet. Too quiet. My calendar was clear except for one strange addition. End-of-week alignment, for 15 p.m., Conference B, a meeting I hadn't scheduled and wasn't expecting. The invite came from Jordan Kessler's executive assistant, and the lack of context in the subject line was louder than any warning siren. Still, I went. That's the thing with people like me, we show up. No matter how strange the timing. No matter the gut feeling that something's not right. We sit through meetings, meet deadlines, keep our heads down, and our tempers in check. We trust that the work will speak for itself. But that day, the rules changed. Stone March Infrastructure had been my home for a decade. The glass walls, the beige carpeting, the endless buzz of printers and projectors, it was all so familiar, so lived in. I could tell who was walking down the hallway just by the rhythm of their steps. I'd built more projects under that roof than I could count. Yet suddenly, the place felt sterile. Like I didn't belong there anymore. Or maybe I was finally seeing it for what it had become. When I walked into Conference B, Jordan was already there. Arms folded, suit too sharp for a Friday, smile too clean. The kind of smile people wear when they're about to say something they know you won't like. 3 other people were in the room. HR, a younger operations director, and someone from legal I'd only met once. No introductions. No handshakes. Just the stale scent of lavender air freshener and a silence so tight it hurt my ears. Jordan leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled like he was reading from a script carved into his palm. "We've decided to bring in someone with a fresher perspective," he said. No preamble. No gratitude. No mention of my name. Your role is being sunset, effective end of month. I didn't blink. I just looked at him. The thing is, when you've been slowly squeezed out of relevance for months, left out of strategy meetings, passed over for key projects, sidelined during client pitches, you learn to brace for this kind of blow. You don't stop it. You just absorb it. So I nodded. HR handed me a packet I didn't read. Legal explained something about severance and NDAs I didn't hear. Jordan, meanwhile, kept going like it was a press release. "This isn't about performance, of course. We appreciate everything you've done over the years," he said, as if appreciation could be measured in bullet points. "But it's time to evolve. Time to pass the torch." I remember thinking, pass the torch to who? And why now? But I said nothing. Instead, I gathered my things, just my laptop, charger, notebook, and the pen I'd used for years. My name was still on the whiteboard in the design room downstairs, but I figured that'd be wiped clean by Monday. As I walked out, I passed by my old team. Some kept typing. A few glanced up, their eyes darting away before I could meet them. Linda, one of the project leads I mentored years ago, looked at me the way someone looks at a gravestone, like she wanted to say something but didn't know if it would matter. When I reached the elevator, I pressed the button and stared at the floor, feeling everything and nothing at the same time. The doors opened and 2 young interns stepped out, laughing about something on their phones. They brushed past me like I was invisible. Maybe to them, I already was. I didn't cry. I didn't clench my fists or punch a wall. I just stood there, back straight, eyes forward, letting the silence stretch around me like a coat I never meant to wear. I had always believed in enduring, in being the calm in the storm, in letting fools run their course until wisdom had a chance to speak. But that day, that moment, it broke something. I used to think I could stick it out just a little longer. Keep the peace. Avoid the fight. Until that meeting. Until that sentence. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just being let go. I was being erased. Quietly. Neatly. Like a line drawn in pencil, wiped away without leaving a mark. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure silence was the right response anymore. I didn't take the car home that evening. I could have. It was parked right where I left it that morning, space 47C in the underground lot, but something about stepping behind the wheel felt too routine. Like it would have been pretending nothing happened. And pretending I'd done enough of that already. So I walked. The air in Denver had that early winter edge to it, cold enough to make your knuckles ache, but not quite bitter yet. The sidewalks were mostly empty, the sun hanging low and orange behind the buildings like it was trying not to get involved. My feet moved on instinct, tracing a path I'd walked dozens of times before, back when I needed a place to think without fluorescent lights humming above me. Funny thing is, the moment you get blindsided, your memory starts stitching together all the little signs you ignored. And God knows there were plenty. Jordan had been pulling away for a while now. Slowly. Like someone backing out of a driveway, hoping no one notices until they're halfway down the block. First, it was canceling our one-on-ones, said we didn't need them anymore. Then, he started inviting me to meetings only after the agendas were finalized. Projects I'd proposed got handed off to younger staff, people who still laughed too loud in the break room and thought seniority was a dirty word. Worse than being excluded was the way he'd smile when he did it. That flat, practiced smirk. I thought it'd be a great growth opportunity for her, he'd say, referring to someone 2 years out of grad school. Or, you've already done so much. Let's let someone else shine for a change. Translation? You've had your run. Step aside. I'd swallowed a lot of that. Told myself it wasn't worth pushing back. I'd outlasted difficult bosses before. But Jordan was different. He wasn't just managing up, he was laying bricks for his own monument and using people like me as the foundation. By the time I reached the corner of South Gilpin and East 3rd, I realized I'd ended up in front of a place I hadn't been to in weeks, Holy Grounds Coffee House. The warm, yellow glow spilling from its windows felt like some kind of invitation. Familiar. Safe. Inside, the smell of roasted beans and old wood hit me like comfort food. The bell above the door gave its usual gentle chime, and that's when I saw him. Reverend Amos Shields. Sitting by the window, same booth as always, book in one hand, a chipped ceramic mug in the other. He looked up and caught my eye before I could pretend I hadn't seen him. Well, if it isn't the ghost of overtime past, he said, setting his book down. I cracked a smile, more out of habit than joy, and slid into the seat across from him. He didn't press. That was the thing about Amos. He never dug for details you weren't ready to give. He just let the silence stretch far enough for you to trip over your own thoughts. I got sunset, I said finally. He raised an eyebrow. They make that a verb now. Apparently. He nodded slowly, took a sip from his mug, then leaned back. You know, when I was edged out of my last post, they told me I was blocking innovation. Said I had too much legacy experience. Like that was a bad thing. I chuckled. That sounds familiar. Amos tilted his head. Look, I'm not saying don't be loyal. But you can't be loyal to a version of a place that no longer exists. I stared at the wood grain on the table, the little scratches and grooves worn in from years of conversations just like this. You've got a gift, he went on, voice softer now. But a gift, when misused, becomes a burden. Don't let them twist it into something disposable. I kept thinking if I stayed quiet, played it steady, they'd see I still had value. Amos leaned forward, eyes steady. Son, you can be steady without being silent. You can be patient without disappearing. But you can't be both loyal and invisible. That's not a career, it's a cage. His words settled somewhere deep in my chest. Not like a revelation, more like a reminder I'd been trying not to hear. We talked for another 15 minutes, mostly about nothing, football, books, the city noise, and when I finally stood up to leave, he didn't say goodbye. Just, you know where to find me. Outside, the wind had picked up. I zipped my jacket, slid my hands in my pockets, and started walking again. By the time I reached my front steps, my phone buzzed. A new email, no subject line.
Just a name. Camille Durant.
I tapped it open and stared at the message. It was short. 4 words. We should talk. Coffee? No signature. No explanation. But it said more than enough. Monday came with the weight of something unresolved. The kind of tension you don't see, but you feel in your shoulders, in the air, in the way people avoid eye contact in hallways. I walked back into Stonemarch's lobby, like a guest in a house I once owned. My badge still worked, for now. No one stopped me. No one welcomed me either. Technically, I still had 2 weeks left before my transition was official. Jordan, of course, hadn't assigned me anything, which was its own silent way of saying, just disappear quietly. I went to my office, if you could still call it that, and kept the door open out of habit. It didn't take long before Linda stopped by. She didn't knock. She just leaned in, arms crossed, eyes a little too bright to be casual. "I need a favor," she said, keeping her voice low. I raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Something you can't ask out loud." She smiled, tired. "You still got a clean copy of the Southvale proposal on your laptop?"
Yeah.
"Why?" She hesitated, then stepped inside and shut the door behind her. "Because Brandon's version is a mess. And we're presenting it to the board tomorrow." I leaned back in my chair. "Didn't Jordan review it?" She gave a dry laugh. "Jordan's more focused on spin than structure. Brandon's a nice enough kid, but he doesn't know how to read a geotech survey, let alone run a load-bearing analysis." I figured if anyone could untangle it. She didn't finish the sentence.
She didn't have to.
I looked at the file she handed me. An exported PDF that still had rough drafts embedded, half the sections unlinked, assumptions based on outdated specs. The kind of thing that gets a company sued if someone actually builds from it. I stayed late that night, longer than I'd planned. Not because I had something to prove, but because there was still pride in the work. My name wouldn't be on it, but I couldn't let something that sloppy reach the board, not with Stonemarch's name stamped across the front. I made corrections. Cleaned up the equations. Cited updated sources. Smoothed the flow so it actually read like a viable proposal instead of a last-minute group project. I didn't change the cover page. Next morning, the main conference room was already filling up when I walked past. I had no seat in there. I wasn't invited. But the doors were glass, and habits are hard to break, so I paused in the hallway, far enough not to draw attention, but close enough to see. Jordan stood at the head of the table, confidently introducing Brandon. "This young man's brought fresh energy to the Southvale project," he said, clapping a hand on Brandon's shoulder. "This proposal shows what happens when we trust new talent to lead." Brandon looked like he hadn't slept. He fumbled with the clicker, skipped over key slides, and mumbled through half his presentation. But the content, my content, held up. The numbers made sense. The structure worked. And the board nodded along, impressed. They weren't hearing Brandon. They were hearing me. I felt a strange cocktail of emotions watching it all unfold. Not anger, exactly. More like something bitter wrapped in something numb. A part of me wanted to walk in and say, "That's mine." But another part knew it wouldn't change anything. Jordan leaned in, fielded questions like he was the architect of the whole thing. Whenever Brandon stumbled, Jordan jumped in to polish it up, adding just enough polish to sound like he had been in the trenches too. I started to turn away, then caught movement in my peripheral vision. Across the room, at the far end of the table, Camille Durant sat with her hands folded, face unreadable. But her eyes met mine through the glass. And they didn't blink. It was only a second, maybe less. But it said plenty. She knew. After the meeting, I walked back to my office. No one said anything. No one needed to. I closed the door, sat down, and stared out the window. You don't always get credit. Sometimes, you have to decide whether you'd rather be remembered or be at peace with what you did, even if no one knows. That morning, I made peace with it. Or at least, I tried. I got to the coffee shop 10 minutes early. Not because I was eager, but because that's just who I am. Show up early. Sit with your back to the wall. Face the door. It's less about caution, more about habit. like laying your tools out before a job, even if you don't know what you'll be fixing yet. Camille had chosen a place I'd never been, modest, tucked between a consignment bookstore and a dry cleaner that still hand-presses shirts. It had mismatched chairs, soft lighting, and the kind of quiet that made you lower your voice without thinking. Not flashy, not loud, not public. The sort of place that says, we're going to have a conversation that doesn't need an audience. I ordered plain coffee.
Black.
Always black. No syrup, no froth, no metaphor. I found a table by the far window, half shadowed from the street. Outside, Denver was doing its usual early winter thing. Clouds thick like wet wool, people wrapped in scarves they wouldn't need by noon. I watched the sidewalk traffic and try not to read too much into the email Camille had sent. For words, we should talk.
Coffee?
No subject line. No signature. Just that. The kind of message that doesn't ask, it tells. She walked in at exactly 10 a.m. on the dot. Same camel coat I'd seen her wear in board meetings, navy scarf tucked neatly under the collar, hair pulled back like always. Camille Durant didn't do casual, not even on Saturdays. But her expression was different that day. Less CEO, more something else. Softer, maybe. Calmer.
Human.
Elliot, she said as she slid into the seat across from me, her hands already wrapping around the warm ceramic mug waiting for her. Thanks for meeting me. I gave a small nod. You don't really ignore an email like that. She smiled, just enough to say she understood what was unspoken. There was a pause. Not the awkward kind, just the kind that hangs when both people know the stakes but aren't ready to lift the lid yet. She didn't waste much time. I saw what you did with the Southvale proposal.
I didn't do anything, I said.
My voice was even careful. You did enough that Brandon didn't fall flat on his face in front of the board. I didn't reply. There wasn't a point in denying it. She already knew. The real question was what she planned to do with that knowledge. Camille leaned forward a little, elbows on the table. Her eyes stayed on mine, steady. I've been watching, Elliot. Not just last week. The past several months. You've kept your center while everything around you shifted. She let that land, then added, that's rare. I raised an eyebrow. Is this where you hand me a plaque and a gentle shove toward retirement? She gave a quiet breath, something between a chuckle and a sigh. I'm not here to offer you a farewell party. I'm here to ask a question. Okay. If I gave you the chance to build something new, outside the current hierarchy, no need to answer to Jordan or his games, would you take it? I blinked. Not because it shocked me. Somewhere inside, I'd felt something was coming. But it was how plainly she said it. No fluff. No politics. No title. I asked. Title's yours if you want it. No team? You get 3 people to start. You choose them. I sat back, letting that settle. A city bus rolled past the window. People on it stared at phones, held paper cups, slumped against windows. Just another Saturday to them. Why me? She didn't flinch. Because you don't need a spotlight to lead. And because you've survived what most men your age would have buckled under. The words landed harder than she knew. I thought of the sleepless nights. The long silences. The moments I sat alone in my car after work, gripping the wheel like it might stop me from falling apart. I'm tired, Camille, I said. Not just in the usual ways. I'm tired of playing chess with people who think loyalty is a weakness. She nodded slowly. Then stop playing their game. Build your own board. There it was, simple and clear. No drama. No threat. Just the truth. A part of me wanted to say no. To walk away. Let the company keep its politics and memory lapses. Let Jordan win whatever cheap version of success he was chasing. I'd done my time. But then there was the other part, the part that still believed in the work. The kind of work that left something behind. Something solid. Something honest. If I say yes, I asked, how soon would I start? Camille stood, slipping her coat back on. You already have. She turned to go, then stopped just before the door. Glancing over her shoulder, she said something I still hear when the office gets quiet and I forget who I used to be. Sometimes, the best way to stand up is not by shouting, but by building something no one can ignore. And then she was gone. I sat there for another 20 minutes, watching steam curl from my half-finished coffee. That sentence stayed with me like a doorway I hadn't quite walked through yet. But I knew I would. The morning I walked back into Stone March, I wasn't the same man who'd stood silently in front of that elevator just 2 weeks earlier. Same building. Same polished concrete floors. Same scent of burnt coffee and overconditioned HVAC. But I'd crossed a threshold inside myself, one I couldn't uncross even if I tried. Nobody greeted me when I stepped through the lobby. Not that I expected a parade. Far as they knew, I was still a ghost in a body, wrapping up the loose ends of a career being sunset. But I wasn't heading for my old office. I took the elevator to the 14th floor. Executive level. The kind of place where doors stayed shut unless you had authority or an invite. That morning, I had both. Camille had kept it quiet. Only she and the board knew. That was the deal. She'd announce it at the next leadership briefing, today's meeting, and I'd walk in like I belonged there. Not to gloat. Not to stir the pot. But to remind a room that the foundation hadn't crumbled just because they stopped looking at it. As I rode the elevator up, I found myself thinking about Reverend Amos. Specifically, something he'd said one rainy afternoon when I stopped by holy grounds with more frustration than faith. Being meek doesn't mean being silent forever, he told me. It means knowing the difference between patience and surrender. Back then, I didn't know which I was living in. Now I did. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and I stepped out into a corridor lined with framed project photos, landmarks Stone March had helped build across Colorado and beyond. Bridges, towers, rail lines, things meant to last, things I'd helped create. Inside the conference room, the usual suspects had already gathered. Jordan sat at the far end of the table, shoulders back, voice loud, filling the space with that brand of corporate confidence that always felt half-rehearsed. When I walked in, a few heads turned. Some blinked in surprise. Others looked quickly away. Jordan froze for a second, just long enough for his voice to catch, then recovered. "Oh," he said, forcing a smile. "Didn't realize you'd be joining us today, Elliot." I gave a nod, calm as a lake. Neither did I, until recently. Camille hadn't arrived yet. She had a habit of walking in last, not for show, but to observe who scrambled when the queen entered the board. I took a seat, not at the edge, not in the shadows, right there, beside the general counsel and across from finance. A seat of someone who mattered. The room filled with the usual shuffle of laptops and water bottles. Jordan went on with some status update about resource allocation. His voice grew tighter the longer I stayed quiet. And then Camille walked in.
She didn't waste time.
"Let's get started," she said, dropping her leather folder on the table. "But first, an announcement." Every neck straightened. Even Jordan leaned forward like he already knew where it was headed. "I want to officially introduce our new Director of Strategic Development," Camille said, turning toward me. "Elliot Raines will be leading the restructuring initiative for all technical operations moving forward." Dead silence. Not shock. At least not from the board. They already knew. But the rest of the room went still, like someone had unplugged the projector mid-slide. Jordan's jaw didn't drop, but his smile evaporated. He blinked, then let out a quick breath through his nose. "Well," he said, "that's a shift." Camille gave a small nod. "It's the right shift. Elliot's experience is critical to where we're headed. And this restructuring needs someone who understands what made us successful before chasing what's next." She looked straight at Jordan when she said it. Not a threat, not a dig, just the truth. I didn't gloat, didn't smirk, just opened my folder and said, "I've already started a diagnostic of the current pipeline. There are inconsistencies we need to address before Q2. Nobody objected. Nobody dared. But I felt it under the table beneath the surface.
The shift. Some folks were relieved.
Some confused. Some threatened. But every person in that room knew something had changed. And I hadn't raised my voice once. By the following Thursday, I had a hunch something was brewing. When Jordan sent out a quick alignment session invite to department heads, tagged urgent but vague, I knew what it was. He was staging a counterplay. and I'd seen enough corporate chess to know what came next.
The room was smaller this time.
Not the big executive boardroom. This was the South Wing Conference, the kind used for strategy scrums and quietly orchestrated power grabs. 10 seats, no microphones. Just eye contact and implication. Jordan stood by the whiteboard, sleeves rolled, blazer draped neatly over the back of his chair. He welcomed folks with that friendly manager tone, light, casual, masking the steel underneath. "Thanks for coming on short notice," he said, nodding at the group. "I wanted to talk through some concerns I've been hearing. Nothing formal, just alignment." He looked right at me when he said it. I didn't blink. As everyone settled, he began pacing slowly, hands tucked in his pockets, like a teacher leading discussion. "I know we've seen some big moves lately," he said. "Structural changes, new roles, and naturally, there's been some friction." He paused just long enough to invite agreement without words. "In times like these," he continued, "it's important we stay true to our culture, to who built this place, and who still represents that." His eyes slid toward me again, less subtle this time. "Now, not everyone fits the new direction. That's okay. Some people just can't let go." That one landed. I didn't move, didn't fold my arms, didn't frown, just waited. Jordan turned back to the whiteboard and drew a quick org chart. Old structure on the left, new version on the right. My name sat at the top of one branch, his at another. Brandon's just below. "You see," he said, gesturing between the columns, "we can't build new foundations if folks keep dragging old bricks into the mix. We need momentum, cohesion." And just like that, I saw what he was doing. He wanted doubt. A seed planted in the minds of those still unsure. Paint me as the legacy holdout, the obstacle to progress. So I stood up, slowly, not to interrupt, but to shift the air in the room. "I agree," I said. "Clarity matters, especially when we talk about culture and cohesion." Jordan stepped aside, wary but still smug. He thought I'd counter with emotions or anecdotes. I didn't. I opened my folder and handed a packet to Camille, who had quietly entered 5 minutes earlier and stood near the back, observing. "These are internal QA reports from the last 3 months," I said, voice calm. "Cross-referenced with project logs. You'll notice that several engineering errors made it past initial review on the Southvale initiative. Errors that required late-stage corrections, some of which were critical." I looked around the table. Nobody blinked. I corrected those errors myself. Quietly. Because I assumed, perhaps naively, that we were all aiming at the same goal. I turned to Camille. "But the reports also show that these mistakes weren't isolated. They were repeated, consistently tied to miscalculations signed off by a single individual." I passed her a second page. "Brandon Van." A beat of silence. Jordan stepped forward, too fast. "Now hold on, Brandon is new, he's learning. You can't expect." "I don't," I said. "I expect his manager to catch the gaps. Mentor him. Guide him. That's your role, Jordan." He opened his mouth again, but I cut in still even, still steady. "The company deserves facts, not narratives." Camille finally stepped forward. Her tone was cool, professional. "Thank you, Elliot. This aligns with some of the concerns we've started tracking in recent weeks." She looked at Jordan now. "In light of this, I'll be initiating a full performance review of the technical leadership structure, especially the pipeline under your supervision." Jordan tried to keep his face still, but the twitch at his jawline said more than his silence ever could. No one said anything for a long moment. Meeting adjourned itself. People gathered their things, mumbled quick goodbyes. Jordan stayed seated, pretending to check his phone, but he wasn't fooling anyone. He'd played the wrong hand. And this time, the board wasn't buying the story. I found Jordan in the engineering lounge, of all places. Not his corner office, not one of the glass-walled meeting rooms he usually claimed like a throne, just the old break room where junior staff microwaved leftovers and argued over fantasy football picks. The blinds were halfway drawn, letting in a strip of late afternoon light that cut across the tile floor like a quiet accusation. He was pacing near the coffee machine, tapping hard at his phone like it had personally betrayed him. The machine let out a soft drip, drip, drip into a paper cup he wasn't watching. The only other sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the oversized analog clock above the door, something from a different decade, like it refused to go digital just to fit in. He didn't look up when I stepped in. "You want something?" he asked without turning, thumbs still scrolling. I shut the door behind me, firm but not aggressive. Just enough to tell him this wasn't a drop-in. "We need to talk." He laughed, short and sharp. "Of course we do. You've been waiting for this moment, haven't you?" I stayed quiet. That got his attention. He finally looked up, eyes sharp, mouth tight, jaw set in that way people do when they're not sure whether to fight or bluff. "This is how you play it," he snapped. "Backdoor politics, side deals with Camille, making me look like I don't know how to manage my own team?" "You don't have to look that way, Jordan," I said, calm as ever. "You just had to let the results speak." He stepped toward me, slow and stiff. "You think you're saving the company? You're not. You're just tearing it apart because you couldn't let go." I didn't raise my voice, just took a small step forward and met him eye to eye. "I didn't break anything," I said. "I just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken." He turned away like my words physically stung, muttering something under his breath. Then louder, with more heat. "I built this team. I kept it running when others checked out. You think the board knows what it takes to hold this place together? They don't. And you? You swoop in with your righteous silence, and now you're the hero?" I let the pause stretch. Not because I needed time, but because he did. "I'm not a hero, Jordan," I said. "But I'm not your cover anymore." He sat down on the edge of the table, arms crossed, legs bouncing with the kind of nervous energy that didn't suit a man used to control. "They'll regret this," he muttered. "Camille. The board. You, especially. You don't erase legacy with a few polished charts." I walked over to the table and placed a folded letter in front of him. "No anger. No ceremony. You're being reassigned," I said. "To the Toledo division. Senior Advisor for Infrastructure Transition. Effective Monday." He stared at it like it was written in a language he didn't want to learn. "I still report to headquarters?" "No," I said. "You won't be involved in Denver operations moving forward." His lips curled. "You don't have the authority." I looked him straight in the eye. "I do. And it's already approved." He stood up fast, knocking his chair slightly off balance. "You're just like the rest of them. Dress it up in words like structure and rebuild, but it's still a power play." "No," I said quietly. "It's a boundary." He scoffed. "You think you're better than me?" I didn't flinch. "I think leadership isn't about protecting your ego. And I think control disguised as loyalty is still control. And that ends here." Something flickered across his face. Not defeat, but fatigue. Like he'd finally run out of ways to spin the story in his favor. He picked up the paper, folded it with precision, and slipped it into his coat pocket. "When do I leave?" "End of the week." He nodded once, turned, and walked out of the room. No thank you. No handshake. I didn't expect either. What I felt wasn't triumph. It was something cleaner. Like a knot I'd carried for years had finally uncoiled itself in the space he left behind. Later that afternoon, I rode the elevator to the top floor. My office was still bare, just a desk, a chair, and a view. The Denver skyline stretched wide in the glass, gold light spilling across rooftops. I stood at the window with my hands in my pockets and thought about everything that had brought me here. The quiet dismissals, the sideways praise, the way 1,000 small moments had taught me to shrink without ever being told. And then the one moment I chose not to. I didn't rise to punish anyone. I rose because I refused to kneel. The office was still when I arrived, quiet in a way that felt deliberate, not empty. Peaceful, like a room finally exhaling. I walked in without rushing, no phone in hand, no laptop open before I sat. Just me, my breath, and the soft hum of the building waking up. I poured myself a cup of coffee from the new machine. A sleek silver one, paid for by a petty cash request I signed off on last week. Nothing fancy, but it brewed clean and hot, Not like the scorched leftovers that used to simmer all day on a burner no one claimed. That machine, this office, the light pouring in from the east-facing windows, it all felt different now. Not bigger. Not better.
Just mine.
The shelves behind my desk were still bare. I hadn't put up certificates, old trophies, or photos of handshakes frozen in time. I'd thought about it, even packed a frame or two. But something in me decided against it. Those moments, the things I built, the respect I'd earned, they were part of me now. Not something I needed to hang on a wall to remind anyone. At 9:17 a.m., an all-staff email hit inboxes across the company. Subject: Personnel Update. Jordan Kessler. No fluff. No pleasantries. Just a one-page memo, written in that careful HR language that says everything and nothing all at once. Effective immediately, Jordan would be transitioning to the Toledo branch, taking on a senior advisory role. He would no longer be involved in headquarters operations. No farewell party. No catered lunch. No slideshow of his years of service. Just gone. I didn't need to open the file. I drafted the first version myself, sitting in this office late one evening with nothing but the low hum of the building and the click of my keyboard for company. What struck me wasn't the silence of the email itself. It was the response or the lack of one. No reaction in Slack channels. No hallway murmurs. No passive-aggressive, what a loss. Emails sent by people who never meant it. Just quiet. Later that morning, I walked through the operations floor. Not in a hurry. Just letting myself be seen. Not for show, but for presence. As I passed the print station near the south windows, I heard Linda speaking to one of the new hires. He built everything on fear, she said. And fear never lasts. Her voice wasn't loud, but she wasn't whispering either. She didn't look around to see if I'd heard. I didn't interrupt. No one pushed back. No one jumped to his defense. It didn't feel cruel. It just felt like truth finally had air to breathe. That afternoon, I stopped by Holy Grounds. Amos was at his usual table by the window, sipping something dark and dog-eared. He looked up and gave me that unreadable smile of his, the kind that said he already knew what I came to say. "You look taller," he said. I smirked. "Pretty sure it's just the boots." He set the book down and gestured to the seat across from him. "So." I stirred my coffee, let the warmth fill the space between my hands. "I didn't do it to win anything," I said. "Didn't want a title. Or revenge. I just couldn't keep playing the part they gave me." Amos nodded, slow and quiet. Sometimes standing tall isn't about being seen. It's about knowing you're no longer shrinking. That one landed.
Deep.
Like a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for months. Later that week, during the quarterly company gathering, Camille pulled me aside backstage before it started.
She didn't ask.
Just said, they need to hear something real. So I stepped up. The auditorium wasn't fancy. Just folding chairs, rented lights, a simple stage with a mic that wobbled a bit at the base. But the people were there: engineers, coordinators, interns, managers. Some who'd known me for years. Others who'd only heard my name in passing. And a few who still weren't sure if I belonged up there. I didn't clear my throat. Didn't pace. I just leaned slightly into the mic and spoke like I was talking to one person who needed it most. "Progress doesn't mean discarding what's old," I said. "It means respecting what brought us here and deciding who we choose to be next." I let it hang. No follow-up. No corporate catchphrase. Just silence. And in that silence, I saw something shift. Not applause, at least not right away. But people looked up. Not at a promotion. Not at a title. They looked at me and saw the man who didn't disappear, even when they tried to write him out. That evening, I stayed late. The skyline outside my office glowed with city lights and slow-moving brake lights along Spear Boulevard. The streets below kept moving, people heading home, heading out, heading somewhere. Life went on like it always does. And I wasn't angry. Not at Jordan. Not at the company. Not at myself. Because I understood something I hadn't before. They thought removing me would silence my voice. Turns out it only gave me a better stage. Before we close, I just want to say this. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't standing up. It's choosing when to stop shrinking. I didn't tell the story to be right or to prove anything. I told it because maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've felt that quiet erosion of worth. Maybe you've kept showing up, hoping someone would finally see the full weight of what you carry. And if that's you, I hope you know this. Your value doesn't disappear just because someone else fails to see it. Have you ever had to reclaim your place? Not with noise, but with quiet conviction? If this story found its way to a part of you that's been waiting to exhale, I'd be honored to have you join me again for the next one. Until then, take care of your voice. It's stronger than you think.